All right. Okay. Sorry, everybody. I have been trying to figure out how to get my desktop audio to play properly for you. And I'm having no luck. Um, so, everyone, hold on just a second. And um, yeah, just give me a moment while I figure out what I'm doing. Um, hmm. All right, well, fuck it. Um, I will just have to do without that particular thing. I cannot figure out why I am too dumb for this. But um I am very excited to talk about the filibuster tonight. And I have a lot of exciting things to say. Thank you all for tuning in. Those of you who are here, cheers. Happy Friday. Um, as always, I'm Rob. This is Radical History. I gonna be doing this a little bit less often, probably during the summer because it is too hot in Portland and I don't have air conditioning, and also because people are busy being out and about. The pandemic is winding down in America. People want to be out in the beautiful wide world, and so I'll be around. I'll be doing these, but probably more um, as I feel like it, basically. And right now, I feel like it. I really want to talk about the filibuster. I'm really excited to talk about the filibuster because it's in the news, and also because this is one of the more incredible and exciting things to happen in American history. One of the delightful artifacts of our beautiful constitutional system, which is perfect in every way and has no obvious flaws, and was laid down by the founders in such a way that it need never be amended or adjusted. And there is no clearer example of that than the filibuster. But before I get to the filibuster itself, let's talk about the history of the word, because I think that's fun. So the word filibuster comes from the Dutch verboetier, or verboetier, freebooter, basically. Freebooter, robber, pirate, plunderer from freeboot, which means plunder, free booty. Exactly as you might think. Free stuff, free booter. And this got transliterated into English, French, Spanish. In French, it's something like filibustier. In Spanish, it's filibustiero. The term first appeared in the English language in 1591. Um, and the word was then fleebooters. Again, origins are Dutch, Spanish and French influences. There's some confusion about when this entered into common parlance, but by the 16th, 17th, 18th century, it's a pretty common term, synonymous with pirate, with buccaneer, with freebooter, and it was well understood by all the peoples of the Americas to mean basically a pirate. Our most famous original filibuster was Piet Hein, who you can see here capturing a Spanish treasure fleet. The Dutch were not the greatest of the pirates, but there were enough of them that they got their own word, filibuster. But the term filibuster, as it came to be known, was a little bit more associated with American expeditions into the Central and South Americas. These were, again, filibustering expeditions, and there was a Neutrality Act in 1794 that made it illegal for American citizens to wage war against another country at peace with the United States. But there were a lot of Americans who did not give a shit about that and wanted to go do their own gun-having, adventuring, fighting the savage hordes of the South. And in the mid-19th century, especially right up leading to the Civil War, mostly Southern slaveholders raised large private armies for expeditions to Mexico, the Caribbean, and Latin America, basically to expand U.S. territory for slavery. This was, again, illegal, but it was supported by Southern elites and some other conservatives, and explicitly and implicitly by U.S. foreign policy. The northern states opposed this, of course, but filibustering continued. It was rare, but it happened, and it was common enough and a popular cause that it would have been fixed in popular memory. The most famous filibuster, perhaps, is a man named William Walker, who was a physician, lawyer, journalist, and ultimately a mercenary, who organized several private military expeditions into Mexico and Central America with the intention of establishing colonies under his control. Walker was explicitly doing this to expand slavery, just to be clear. Sometimes you will hear about filibusters. I read one account of this where it was a news article mentioned that they were fomenting revolution, which makes it sound like they're good guys trying to throw off the yoke of the Spaniards or something like that. But that's not the case. They were trying to make slavery an institution across the entire Americas. These guys were awful. So in 1853, Walker set out with 45 men to conquer the Mexican territories of Baja California and Sonora State. He captured La Paz, which is in Baja California, sparsely populated, and declared it the capital of a new Republic of Lower California with himself as president. He put the region under the laws of the American state of Louisiana, which made slavery legal in Baja California, which it was not. However, Walker, again, only had about 50 men. He fled to a couple of different places, and then ultimately resistance by the Mexican government forced him to retreat. In California, he was put on trial for conducting an illegal war, again under the violation of the Neutrality Act of 1794. Still, no one cared. Filibustering was very popular, and the jury acquitted him in 8 minutes. He went back down to Nicaragua twice in 1856, where he ruled until May the 1st, 1857, briefly establishing a American Nicaraguan republic. He was forced out and then came back in 1860 and was finally executed by the government of Honduras. That really has nothing to do with the filibuster politically, but it is the origin of the word, and I like talking about it, so bear that in mind as we take a bit of a step backwards and discuss one Aaron Burr, who you see here shooting Alexander Hamilton. He deserved it. In any case, Aaron Burr, believe it or not, is the person that we have to thank for the beautiful, perfect, unimpeachable institution of the filibuster. So, bear with me for a moment. The House and Senate rulebooks in 1789, when the Constitution was laid down and all the rules of Congress were established, were basically identical. They included a very common motion, a common rule called the previous question motion. And it basically empowers a simple majority to cut off debate. So it's just a rule that says you can cut off debate with a simple majority and end the conversation. But in 1805, shortly after he had murdered Alexander Hamilton, Vice President Aaron Burr was presiding over the Senate, as the vice president does, and he pointed out that the previous motion rule had not been used but once in the past 4 years, and that this was a great deliberative body. You need a cleaner rule book. Just get rid of the rule. Neither chamber was using the rule. There really wasn't any need for this type of parliamentary procedure at the time. Everybody was sort of working on their own. They were more congenial. They were more professional, one might say. And Aaron Burr, stupidly, but perhaps it made sense in the context, said, let's just get rid of this rule. And so the Senate dropped this rule from the rule book. And this was generally meant, they didn't think too hard about it, but it's thought that they wanted to protect minority rights and extend the debate. So that's it, by the way. That's the origin of the filibuster. The reason why Senate business can be ground to a halt by a minority, an increasingly small minority of senators, is because there simply is not a rule allowing for the end of debate. It is not written into the Constitution that the filibuster exists, that a minority be able to hold up discussion in the Senate forever. It's literally just a missing rule, a rule that was removed. I want to remind you all that the Founding Fathers, among other things, did not anticipate the rise of political parties, and they thought they would be dangerous to democracy. It does not really matter what the Founding Fathers thought. We are allowed to change anything we want. This is the foundation of many, many democracies around the world. It is preposterous and also not in keeping with what the founders themselves believed, that we would have to adhere to their original rules. But even if it were, this is not a rule that was included in the Constitution. So, starting around 1806, it is no longer possible to move Senate business along without a majority. Sorry, you need more than a majority. But the filibuster is not used for more than 30 years. It was purely a theoretical option. But in 1837, our very first filibuster occurs, when a group of Whig senators filibustered to prevent friends of President Andrew Jackson from expunging a resolution of censure against him. If it sounds like this doesn't matter, you're right, it doesn't. But that's our first filibuster. A little bit later, in 1841, when Whig Senator Henry Clay is trying to end the debate to charter a new national bank, Senator William King threatened to filibuster, and Clay was forced to back down. Now, this was still extremely rare in this period in American history. The filibuster is not used, but this starts to change, especially leading up to and after the Civil War. By mid-century, and especially after the Civil War, with Reconstruction, the Senate grew larger and more polarized along party lines. It had more work to do, and people started paying attention to it. Previously, the Senate didn't do a whole lot. There wasn't a lot for it to do, but it became increasingly important. And by the 1880s, almost every Congress began to experience some sort of obstructionism, usually over civil rights, election law, nominations, even just appointment of Senate officers. Just people being obstructionist, much like how it is used today. The OED says that the first time a legislator was called a filibuster to accuse him of being an obstructionist was in 1889, and in the next year, 1890, was the first usage of the word filibuster to mean the tactic of talking for a long time to obstruct Senate business. Filibustering senators were, by extension, pirates raiding the Congress for their own personal and political gain. So it's hilarious, given the history, that this is seen as a staunch and wonderful institution of American history, given that the people who started using it meant it as a grave and serious insult. But that's okay. History has never bothered anybody in the 21st century when it comes to actually understanding how things work. But things have to get done. And the kind of things that have to get done are war. And so in 1917, the rule of cloture was introduced to the Senate. And this just means closure, or informally a guillotine. And it's a motion or process in parliamentary procedure aimed at bringing debate to a quick end. It originated in the French National Assembly during their revolution, from which the name is taken. Its clôture is French for the act of terminating something. So this was instituted into the Senate because in March of 1917, Woodrow Wilson wanted to arm merchant vessels in response to wanton German U-boat attacks. But a group of senators filibustered this, leading him to brand these obstructionists a little group of willful men. And with public opinion on his side and the bully pulpit and war fervor, he was able to force the Senate to create the cloture rule, which the press dubbed a war measure. Well, the public burned senators in effigy all around the country. Wilson and the Democrats framed this as a matter of national security. They fused procedure with policy and managed to shame senators into reform. It takes, to remind you, or to say for the first time, I suppose, a 2/3 majority to do any sort of rules changes to the Senate. And even with cloture, though, the golden age of the filibuster is only just upon us, folks. During the 1930s, Senator Huey Long of Louisiana used the filibuster to promote his populist policies. He, again, at this time, you couldn't just say I'm filibustering, you had to actually talk. And he recited Shakespeare and read out recipes for potluckers during his filibusters, which occupied 15 hours of debate. At the time, the record. In 1946, 5 Southern Democrats blocked a vote on a bill proposed by Democrat Dennis Chavez of New Mexico that would have created a permanent fair employment practice committee to prevent discrimination in the workplace. This filibuster lasted for weeks, and Senator Chavez was forced to remove the bill from consideration, even though he had enough votes to pass it. That filibuster was already causing problems, but perhaps the most famous use of the filibuster and one of its most staunch proponents was, at the time, Democratic Senator Strom Thurmond of South Carolina, friend of Joe Biden, who broke Huey Long's record in 1957 by filibustering the Civil Rights Act of 1957 for 24 hours and 18 minutes, during which he read laws from different states and recited George Washington's farewell address in its entirety. Ultimately, this bill passed, though this filibuster remains the record. Strom Thurmond and other segregationist Democrats were very fond of using the filibuster to stop anything of consequence from happening. The history of the filibuster seems pretty cut and dry. It's not that it was only used to prevent progressive legislation, but seems like a lot of the time it was used to prevent progressive legislation. So why do people have this fondness for it? Well, I'll tell you. It is largely because of this film. The 1939 movie Mr. Smith Goes to Washington, which stars our beautiful boy Jimmy Stewart, directed by Frank Capra. And I was going to show you a clip from this, but I cannot figure out why my desktop audio doesn't work, so just look it up yourself. You can watch some of it on YouTube or find it on Amazon. It's a good movie. I'll get to that in the end. But Jimmy Stewart plays Jefferson Smith, who is the head of the Boy Rangers in a unnamed western state, who is appointed senator after the previous senator dies and the governor has to pick somebody. The governor picks Jefferson, because he's a rube, he's guileless, he's a good old boy, he doesn't know any better, and he can be easily manipulated. He goes to Washington, he's wrapped around the finger of this seemingly kind elder senator who's actually corrupt, who gets him to authorize a bill that will get the federal government to buy some land in his home state for a national boys camp, and that will be paid back by youngsters across America. But it's actually a graft scheme, something to do with a dam and land, whatever. It's incomprehensible. Smith launches a filibuster after he's exposed and accused of being corrupt, to postpone the appropriations bill and prove his innocence on the Senate floor. He talks nonstop for 25 hours, reaffirming the American ideals of freedom and disclosing the dam scheme's true motives, but it doesn't work. Everyone turns against him. All these letters pour in telling him to give up because he's been smeared in the media, and but he won't. He won't, because he believes in America. Ultimately, he faints, but his patriotism and honesty and respectability gives this corrupt senator who betrayed him a crisis of conscience, and he bursts into the chamber and confesses his guilt, exonerating Smith, and everything's right in the world, whatever. This film, of course, portrays the filibuster as a honest, democratic measure used by good people to stop corrupt bills from passing, and this is a good movie. It's a great movie. I am a sucker for Frank Capra. I'm a sucker for Jimmy Stewart. I love it when he talks like this and he gets all worked up about doing the right thing. But I have to admit that that Frank Capra and Jimmy Stewart have probably done more damage to American democracy in popular imagination than perhaps anybody else. Without this movie, I cannot imagine that anybody would have a fond opinion of the filibuster. But because of Mr. Smith Goes to Washington, I think that a lot of people in the popular imagination of Americans think that it is a tool to be used by honest folk to prevent the powerful from running over the minority, which is, again, how it is framed by dishonest people who want to use it to stop anything from happening in the Senate. Which brings us to sort of the modern day. There's more changes to the way the law works, but they're all in recent memory and not really the realm of history. And just know that the use of the filibuster goes up, and that it goes up precipitously after 2001. And it's always been an obstacle, but it's become an increasingly large obstacle in recent years. So for comparison, the number of bills passed in the 85th Congress in 1957 through 59 was 25% of all bills introduced were eventually passed into law. By 2005, that number had fallen to 12.5%, and by 2010, only 2.8% of introduced bills became a law, a 90% decline from 50 years prior. You can see here our big wet boy Ted Cruz reading from Green Eggs and Ham. He, debate dork that he is, probably loves the filibuster, and he loves the filibuster for a lot of reasons, not least of which is that he's a Republican. And the Republicans can pass all of their desired legislation, which is basically tax cuts or judicial appointments, without a 60-vote majority. Both tax cuts can be accomplished through reconciliation, and judges, because of a half measure, only need 50 votes to be confirmed. So that's really it. When you look at the history of the filibuster, objectively, in my opinion, and maybe, there are a lot of people who are invested in tradition and government and who want to make something of this, who will try to argue for the power and significance and meaningfulness of the filibuster, but it's very clear that this was an accidental rule, that the founders certainly didn't intend for this type of obstruction to be so easy, and that people who are attached to this because of some sort of Senate congeniality or a sense of commitment to order and rules and tradition are really just committed to not doing anything. And this is a very convenient excuse for why they don't have to act or pass any bills. This is a mistake, an artifact of a poorly designed parliamentary procedure, and it can be changed. Not easily. And I don't know that the rules that are in place would allow for it with the vote majorities that currently exist. But with all of that being said, it can be changed. And there's nothing irreconcilable. There's nothing permanent. There's nothing particularly important about this. So anybody who argues for the filibuster is either completely brain poisoned by American political exceptionalism or covering for something else. So that's the history of the filibuster. I hope you all enjoyed that. Thank you for listening to me talk and ramble about this. It's delightful. It's interesting. It's absurd, like so much of American history. So don't let anybody tell you the filibuster matters or is important. Stay healthy out there. Get vaccinated. Stay safe. And I will see you all next time.